You're listening to Artful Divorce, a podcast dedicated to helping you make sense of the divorce process. I'm John Kinney, a family law attorney, and I'm here to help you find clarity with practical advice and compassionate insights. Hi, this is John Kinney, and this is Artful Divorce. I'm here today with Leanne Mercer, a divorce coach. We're speaking to you from Omaha, Nebraska, and we are going to talk today about those first days after you either come to the conclusion that you want a divorce or you come to the realization, either voluntarily or involuntarily, that a divorce is happening. And we're here to try to explain some of the things that you might want to think about if a divorce is coming your way. And I sort of think we wanted to talk about what would happen if you found out and you started to panic, and what should you do? And Leanne is a divorce coach. I'm a divorce lawyer with 30 years experience, and we're going to talk about those first days. So I am going to talk about first getting your mind right. And so there's a sort of a mental health component to trying to cope with those first days. And so you might be sad, you might be angry, and a lot of times it's very difficult for people to concentrate. And I guess I'll ask you, Leanne, during your divorce, in those first days for you, what was that like? How did you handle it?
Hopefully well, but it's a lot to, when you've made a decision to drastically change your life path and separate your family with that person that you've been living with for years. It's a huge decision. So I think if you can go easy on yourself and maybe not tell too many people what you're thinking, and try not to say anything to your children or family in a way. I think if you have really made the decision just to try to sit with it for a few days and think of how you're going to handle it.
Well, I think that's really important. It also could be that you're the one who suddenly finds out and you're being pulled into a divorce. And so,
True.
But I think the thought process is the same. Play a little poker, play chess, keep things to yourself a little bit.
Right.
I have clients who are very angry and they send texts that later become evidence, and they're not very pretty texts, and they have outbursts, or they get, there's nothing wrong with getting depressed, but you have to be thoughtful about who you tell that you're depressed, or you're not necessarily having suicidal thoughts, but just, that you're really down. Sometimes those things can be used against you. And so you have to sort of pull back and be very thoughtful instead of emotional. And that's really hard because you have all these emotions.
Right.
So what can you do with all those emotions, do you think?
Well, I think that's good advice. Do not go to social media. Do not text a bunch of things that could be used against you. Maybe make an appointment with your doctor. If you have a therapist, that might be a good idea. And if you have a close circle of, if you have a best friend or somebody you can confide in with what you're deciding besides your spouse. So
one of the things that I see in my clients is sort of a push and pull with minor children as to what to tell them about and what to talk to them about. And I think it's possible for people to make some boundary mistakes there as well, right?
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, children, it depends what age they're at, but they really don't want to know, they don't want to be caught in the middle. They don't want to be confused with it or feel like you're angry or upset with the other spouse. So
the problem with that is that you might be the spouse who's handling things correctly, and then your soon-to-be ex might be blurting things out, blaming you, putting the kids in the middle. I mean, how do you handle that?
Yeah, that's very difficult because, people get so emotional and upset. So if you're able to discuss with your spouse that the kids will try our very best for the sake of our children, not to put them in the middle, not to say anything negative. So,
yeah, I think not to sound like a therapist, but I think there's a couple things I've learned over the years that therapists tell their clients, and that is a child needs to know that they didn't cause any rupture in the marital relationship. They didn't cause any problems. It's not their fault.
right.
And they also, from therapists, what I've learned over the years is that children derive their self-esteem from their parents. And the world makes sense to them and they feel good about themselves because their parents are good people.
Right.
And they're good people because mom and dad are good.
Yes.
So when one parent goes and starts to say, your mom or your dad is X, Y, and Z, kids internalize that, and suddenly they start to feel like, well, if my mom or dad aren't good people, then I must not be a good person.
Right.
That's very oversimplifying, but that's the danger in starting to talk to kids real quickly and blurt out angry things. The other thing that happens is you might be having a glass of wine and talking to a friend on the phone, thinking you're alone, and your children might be in the next room hearing everything that you say.
Yeah.
And I've seen that mistake happen quite a bit, and you just really want to avoid that because they're soaking everything up.
Right.
And sometimes if you're talking to an adult friend and you think you're alone, some of the things you might say might be devastating to a child. So those are things to think about.
Yeah,
right?
that's good advice. I mean, kids really do absorb a lot, and they take it as a negative. If you say something negative about your spouse, it just hurts your kids.
Yeah.
Because they feel like they internalize it.
So I think there's a certain number of people who are very sad in those first days. And sometimes the flip side of sadness is anger. And so there's a mixture of that. There's also a fair amount of people, in my experience, who've sort of processed the divorce for years before it comes around, and their emotions are completely different. And it's almost unfair, but they've emotionally processed the death of their marriage for years or months prior to it coming to sort of fruition. And they're not going to feel sad. They're not going to feel angry. They've been through all that already. And so there can be I guess the word would be an incongruence,
Right.
maybe?
Yes.
In the two parties. And the person who's already done a lot of the processing can look very cold
Right.
and unemotional and detached. And that can be shocking to people, I think.
Right. Yeah.
And so it all depends on personality and everything else. But I think the scenarios and mindset of people about to go through a divorce can vary in dozens and dozens of ways. So we'll probably not be able to talk about all the different scenarios. But now I've been through a divorce as well, and so
Yes.
we're professionals in the area of divorce, but we're also personally experienced, so to speak. And I don't want to talk too much about my own processing,
Right.
but there were all of these things involved. And I think the most important thing is to be very methodical in how you approach communicating with
Right.
children, with friends, things on social media.
Yeah.
You need to also be aware of your lifestyle.
Right.
Do you have friends that you know who maybe got a little wild while they were going through a divorce?
Not so much, but I think that's totally a possibility, right?
Yeah, what I've seen is sort of a sowing your oats sort of thing can happen. Like, suddenly I'm free to date and to go a little wild, and that's not a very healthy response either. But it's certainly predictable and
Right.
understandable in some ways. But if you're going to go meet with a lawyer,
Right.
The lawyer's going to tell you, govern yourself as if you're the best mom or the best dad, and
Right.
not the best party goer,
True. Right.
and that's because if there are any custody or parenting time issues, you want to kind of rein yourself in, and you don't want to be out at 2 a.m. But frankly, I see that all the time.
Right.
Yeah.
And that doesn't surprise me, really. I mean, it depends how long you've been married and how long, if you were, waiting a long time to make that decision.
If I had the chance to talk to people while they're, oftentimes people don't get to me for weeks. If I had a chance to talk to people, I would say, thinking about the right things.
Right.
And maybe you could describe sort of what you went through, or maybe have seen with friends or family that have been divorced, where people maybe focus on a granular level of emotional detail on something instead of maybe healthier thoughts. Maybe as a coach, what would you, if somebody was sitting down and they went on a 5 or 10 minute rant, what would be your advice to them?
Well, I would suggest, if they're really upset about the divorce and maybe focusing on minor issues or differences, that, you're going through something really emotionally draining right now, making such a huge life choice and such a change that's going to impact your children and your family going forward. So if you can see a therapist or confide in a friend privately where your kids can't hear it, the rest of the time, try to push it out of your head, because you're going to try to build a life going forward with your spouse that's changed. And you're going to be at those weddings and graduations. And so if you can cope with the short-term pain of all of the uncertainty, because I think uncertainty causes more stress for people, of all the change that you're going through, and try to let go of some of the anger, then you'll be in better shape to be friends, ideally friends later with your spouse.
I sometimes give my clients the advice of trying to engage in healthier habits when they're going through a divorce. Maybe try something that they've never done before, like yoga or CrossFit, or maybe change your diet to be
Right.
healthier, try to get better sleep. All those things are great things to talk about, but when you're going through a divorce, they're almost impossible to do.
Right.
And so it's very hard, but keeping your mind right and keeping healthy is going to be the best way to sort of cope as you go through things.
Oh, yes. When you're pushed so much with your life choices, it's like if you go to see a psychiatrist, they're going to tell you to eat well, get out every day for some sunlight, go to sleep at the same time, have some routine. And people do feel better, if they take better care of themselves and don't expect so much from themselves.
Yeah, and I think it's important for people to start to realize that they need to be focused, because as you and I are going to transition at some point and talk about lawyers and evidence and getting ready for a divorce, and
Right.
if you have somebody who can't focus when they're talking to you as a lawyer,
Right.
I that's a problem for me, and I have to redirect people a lot. And I have this funny little thing I say to people, and that is, I wish I could be working with the person that you're going to be 2 years from now. And that doesn't sound very nice, but I'm just trying to get across the point that you're in PTSD, you can't focus, you're on the divorce diet, you've already lost 15 pounds, you're not living a healthy lifestyle, and then you come in and talk to a lawyer and you start to go on a 10 or 15 minute rant about the $5,000 deposit you put down on the Disney vacation and how that's going to be wasted. And frankly, I throw up my hands and say, there's so many more important things to think about.
Right.
And you need to be focused on bigger picture things. And, you need to be thoughtful instead of emotional. And it's just really hard. It's really hard to get people not to be super emotional. But the critical thing is that if you're going to have a successful divorce outcome,
right,
you have to be able to help the people around you get you ready. And you have to be able to get good information and good data to your lawyer. And if you're not healthy and you're not focused, you're not going to be able to do that. And then you're going to be even more stressed out because your divorce isn't happening the way you want it to,
Right.
And so, garbage in, garbage out. If you give your lawyer garbage, you're not going to get a good result. So I've just kind of gotten up on a pedestal here talking about it, but I've just lived so much of working with people who are very, very good, competent, successful people who are at their lowest when they walk through my door.
Right.
And that's where you come in, right?
Yes, that ideally, yes, because you could help. Then they have an impartial person helping them look at their divorce without going right to the attorney, because your time is valuable. So when they go to see you, it's ideally they don't bring their emotional lack of focus and the little upsets, but the information they need to bring you to actually navigate their divorce.
Yeah, so it sounds cold, it sounds like the lawyer doesn't care, but I would rather have a client have already spoken to somebody like you or somebody in your role, right, to talk about those things that are more along the lines of mental health and the emotional side of things.
Right.
So that when they get to me, I can get the information that I need. I always joke that I'm the world's worst and most expensive therapist. And
That's a good way to put it.
Well, my clients roll their eyes at me like, gosh, this guy's such a jerk. But the point I'm trying to get across is we can talk. I mean, I've learned a lot over 30 years. We can talk about narcissism and personality disorders and bipolar. We can talk about all that. And I have some things to share, not in any sort of educated way, but life experience way. But that's not what I'm here for. And if you want me to be the instrument that really, really helps you in your divorce, don't talk to me about that stuff. No. Because you're wasting your time and my time. And it sounds so cold to say wasting, right? But again, you're paying a lawyer a lot of money.
Oh, yeah.
And you're paying them to help you with parenting time, custody, alimony, asset division, all these things. That's where their expertise is.
Yes.
Don't use the wrong instrument or think that they're something different than what they are. And so I think it's important for people going through a divorce in those first days to decide, who's going to help them.
Right.
Yeah.
Totally. And to have their outside sources figured out. Because if you tie the attorney in with your emotions, it's going to be expensive.
Yeah.
And your divorce won't move forward.
Yeah, I think that ties into a little bit of a discussion of attorney's fees, which we're going to get to in another episode. But this whole idea of hourly billing, right?
Right.
And if a lawyer's billing you hourly and you're sending them 10 emails in a single day, where you're just going, and a lot of that has to do with reassurance.
Right.
And I think people that are going through a lot emotionally become somewhat addicted to reassurance. Some people just have that personality anyway.
Right.
But you shouldn't rely on your lawyer for reassurance. No. And people often do. Now, I will say, I think one of the things that's enriching about being a divorce lawyer is that people come to see you, and when you're done imparting some of the logic and wisdom and roadmaps that we give to our clients, I think they do feel better. They do feel reassured.
Right.
But those phone calls and texts and emails where you're just, unloading your stress, you can't do that with a lawyer, because you're going to get a bill in the first couple months and it's going to be, outrageous.
Right. And then that's another stressor, and already a very difficult time, right?
Yeah.
And I think people will also focus on little things that don't really matter that much in the end.
Disney vacation. Although $5,000's $5,000, I get it, but
that's a little more. But fighting over like furniture or little things like that, that's not worth wasting a bunch of professional time.
Yeah, I call that divorce triage.
Oh.
So there are certain things that are, you look at the gurney and it's going to die. The Disney vacation is dead. You might get a partial refund, okay? But let it die. It's gone. And then there's the other gurney with something that can be saved, but it's meaningless. And so I have folks who come to me in the first days, the first meeting, and they want to talk all about assets and how do retirement accounts get divided, and what about the family business? Well, those are huge things,
right?
But they're going to be alive later, and we can deal with them later, right? So if you're going to be productive in your conversation with a lawyer, do some triage.
Right.
Let the things that are going to die. Let the things that are going to live, but they can be dealt with later. We'll do surgery on that later.
Right.
The things that happen at the beginning of a divorce that at least I focus on with my clients is, where's everybody going to live? What's going to happen with the kids?
Right.
A lot of times that bleeds into dealing with real estate, and how are we going to pay the bills?
Right.
Those are the emergent issues, and that's what I think you need to start focusing on as you start to get ready to go see a lawyer.
Right.
And we'll get into maybe a little bit about the kinds of things that you can do to help your lawyer during that initial consultation. But the bottom line is that if you're going to have a successful divorce outcome, it's going to take work.
Yes.
And you're already talking about somebody who's having a hard time focusing, and they probably should be very careful about their job.
Right.
I've seen plenty of clients get fired during their divorce because they couldn't perform. So you have to make sure you're bringing it at work.
Right.
So you're
Getting your
already
rest.
spread thin. How are you going to help your lawyer? How are you going to be energetic and productive and get them the information they need? That's tough. And that, I think clients need to know that it's going to be hard for them. So they kind of need to have a team, right?
Yes. Yes.
And there are plenty of people in their lives, I'm sure, that are not going through a divorce who can really help them.
True.
There's not just coaches, but like who else could help in that context?
When you've made a decision to get a divorce?
Yeah.
Besides your family, like the school, sometimes I think depending with your kids, depending how you and your spouse are deciding to do this, and you're going to share the information with your children and transition them. I think you can use counselors. You can get your kids counseling appointments too, to handle the transition of divorce. A divorce coach, obviously, would be helpful to have you go those different routes of to make sure you cover everything and don't drain the wrong resources, like your attorney.
Yeah. So I've had success with clients who have brought somebody to meetings, and have somebody taking notes and somebody assisting. You have to be kind of careful about that as a lawyer, because you want to maintain confidentiality. And
Right.
if there's a third party involved in conversations, potentially the communications are discoverable, so to speak,
Right.
to put it in a technical legal term. So you have to be careful about, you know, what you're going to talk about in meetings involving more than just your client. But what I have found, and this is kind of funny, I talk to so many clients who don't write down a thing that I'm telling them, not a thing. Right. And I give them a punch list. During an initial consultation, I give my clients homework. I give them things that they have to go get and have to do.
Right.
And routinely, like more than half the time, they're not writing down a thing. And I always think, how are you going to remember all this?
Oh.
So I end up writing everything down, making a photocopy of it and giving it to them. But if they had somebody there,
right,
you know, to help them in meetings and help them through the divorce, that can be, I think, very nice to have if you have that for you.
Right. And always making notes of, and I think I advise people that I think it's a good idea to record all of the times you actually reach out. So you have a bit of a diary of when you called your attorney or you sent an email, date it and time it, you know, so you have a record too. And then you can catch yourself and be like, oh, I should put that question with the next time. If it's not urgent, you can send an email and have 4 points in one email that you had a question about.
Well, that's a good point that I oftentimes see. You know, if you send one email or try, you know, it's reach for the phone when something, you know, hits your forebrain and you just want to talk to your lawyer about it. You're gonna, if number one, it's going to be expensive, but it's going to annoy your lawyer if you don't save everything up.
Right.
Right. So if you have, just think of Monday through Friday. If you send an email every day on a different subject matter and you are also calling, that's a recipe for disaster.
Right. Yeah.
Bite your tongue.
Focus.
Focus.
Yes.
Pull back, you know, follow the 24-hour rule, you know. Mm-hmm. If you really, really want to reach for the phone or get the keyboard, just wait and save it up if it's not an emergency so that you have one effort at communication with a number of items and then you can get a clear response. And we may talk about how overwhelmed lawyers are and routinely we're criticized for not getting back to people and not communicating well. And there's reasons for that, maybe excuses, but there's reasons for that we can talk about. But you can also help in that regard.
Totally.
Right? And rein yourself in a little bit.
Yes. And then if you wait until you have enough questions of substance, you've given it a bit of time, then you can send all of them to the attorney at one time so you're not blowing up their phone. And you might realize that a lot of your questions, you've already answered them, or they're not really their attorney's area.
Let's talk a little bit about those things that you may want to have available to you during a first meeting with a lawyer. Did you come up with a list of expenses for your lawyer when you went through a divorce?
I did not really.
Okay.
I knew when I got my divorce, all my kids were adults. Mm-hmm. So it just kind of made my process a lot easier. And my husband and I are trying to maintain a friendship and be good co-parents mm-hmm. through their adulthood. So,
well, I'm just thinking of things that your lawyer's naturally going to ask you, you know, and when we talk about income and expenses, you know, I always like it when a client brings in tax returns and pay information, yes. and then also brings in sort of a budget or a list of expenses.
Yeah, so and if you have a mortgage and all of the things to figure out, yes.
Yeah.
Gathering all of that and having a checklist of all your property and your assets, your debts, your credit cards, all of that you'll want to eventually bring to the attorney. But certainly, depending on the situation of your divorce, you're also tied to that spouse for their, for your banking history and how your credit history. So you want to be a little careful. Maybe don't go spending a lot of money at that time either.
Yeah.
prioritizing, because like you said, people can lose their jobs and high stress, and what is your core things that you have to keep, and maybe cut out the other things.
Yeah. Your lifestyle is going to change, right?
Yeah.
Everybody's lifestyle changes, and you're taking basically one household and one set of bills, and you're pulling that apart, and you have two households and two sets of bills.
Right.
And so naturally, the money's going to get tighter. And you have to be prepared for that.
And if you had, some things that you could do without for a while you're navigating your divorce, I think setting a budget is always a good idea, and bringing to your attorney all of your monthly expenses, like the mortgage, the car payment, health insurance, the things you have to keep.
So in those first days, first days or weeks getting ready, you have to start marshaling together some of those things that that your lawyer is going to need, and your team can help you do that.
Right.
Thanks for joining us on Artful Divorce. If today's episode was helpful, you can find more information at www.artfuldivorce.com. The information provided in this podcast is for general informational purposes only and is not intended to be legal advice. For personalized legal advice tailored to your situation, consult a qualified attorney licensed in your area.